No one prepares women for what really changes after 60. Not your doctor. Not your family. Not society. Not even the books that promise confidence at any age. Because the hardest shift isn't your skin. It isn't your metabolism. It isn't even menopause. It's something quieter and far more brutal. One day, you realize you're still the same woman on the inside, but the world starts treating you like you're fading out. Like you're done. Like your opinions are optional. Like your presence is background noise. And if you felt that, even once, let me ask you something. Have you ever walked into a room and suddenly felt unseen? Not disliked, not rejected, just erased. Because today I'm going to tell you the truth no one tells women after 60. A truth that explains why so many intelligent, capable, emotionally aware women begin to feel anxious, invisible, or strangely disconnected from themselves, even when nothing is wrong on the surface. And more importantly, I'm going to show you how to reverse that internal damage. Not with fake positivity, not with cliches, but by understanding what actually changes inside the brain, the nervous system, and your sense of identity, and how those systems can be rebuilt. But before we go any further, I want you to make one promise to yourself. Do not dismiss what you're about to hear as just aging. Because it's not. It's conditioning. It's culture. It's neurochemistry. It's learned emotional patterns. And patterns, no matter how old, can be changed. If you're a woman who wants to strengthen her mind, calm her nervous system, and build a life that still feels like her own, make sure you're subscribed to this channel. Not because you need more content, but because the brain learns through repetition. And what we build here is reinforcement. Now listen closely. In a few minutes, I'm going to share one sentence, just one, that reveals the hidden psychological trap many women fall into after 60 and quietly restores their sense of power and self-respect. But first, you need to understand what's really happening beneath the surface. Here's the truth that feels almost uncomfortable to say out loud. After 60, many women don't just experience change. They experience devaluation. And it rarely looks dramatic. It looks subtle. It looks like being interrupted more often. Like your ideas being ignored until someone younger repeats them. Like people speaking around you instead of to you. Like being called sweetie or dear in a way that quietly shrinks you. Like your time being treated as automatically available. Like your needs becoming extra. Let me ask you something honestly. When was the last time someone asked what you want, without assuming the answer? Because most women don't fight the shift. They adapt. They become easier, more flexible, less demanding, more accommodating. They stop asking. They stop expecting. They stop taking up space. At first, it feels like peace. But over time, it becomes something else. It becomes self-erasure. And this is where the body enters the story. When the nervous system repeatedly receives the message, you don't matter as much anymore, it doesn't process that as a simple thought. It processes it as a social threat. The brain's emotional center is wired to treat exclusion as danger. So even if your life looks calm on the outside, your body may feel tense on the inside. Your sleep becomes lighter. Your patience shorter. Your emotions closer to the surface. Your chest tightens for no clear reason. And then you start questioning yourself. Why am I reacting like this? Why does this still affect me? I should be stronger by now. But here's what you need to understand. You're not weak. You're not overreacting. You're not imagining it. Your nervous system is responding exactly as it was designed to respond when belonging feels uncertain. And that's why so many women after 60 feel anxious, restless, or emotionally exposed, even when nothing obviously wrong is happening. It's not because something is wrong with you. It's because something important has shifted, quietly, in how the world responds to you. And once you see that clearly, something else becomes obvious. There are forces shaping this experience that no one ever names. And until you see them, you'll keep blaming yourself for something that was never your fault. What most women don't realize is that this feeling doesn't come from one single cause. It's shaped by several forces working quietly in the background. Forces so familiar, so normalized, that they're rarely questioned. And once you begin to see them clearly, something shifts. Because what finally has a name stops feeling like a personal failure. There are 3 powerful forces shaping how many women experience life after 60. They operate quietly. They're rarely discussed. And because they're unnamed, they're often internalized as personal failure. Let's name them. The first force is social invisibility. This is not something you imagined. And it's not just in your head. In many cultures, women are unconsciously valued for youth, caregiving, and emotional availability. And when a woman passes a certain age, society subtly reassigns her to a background role. You're still useful, still needed, but no longer centered. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like people appreciate what you do, but no longer seem curious about who you are? That's social invisibility. The second force is identity loss through role collapse. For decades, your sense of self may have been anchored to roles. Mother, partner, professional, caretaker, the one who held everything together. But after 60, many of those roles shift, sometimes abruptly. Children grow independent. Careers slow down or end. Relationships change. The body changes. And suddenly, there's a quiet question that no one prepares you for. Who am I when I'm no longer needed the way I used to be? This question doesn't come from weakness. It comes from transition. And when identity is built around responsibility, the absence of urgency can feel like emptiness. The third force is misunderstood motivation loss. Many women believe that if they feel less driven, less energized, or less excited about the future, something must be wrong with them. But motivation is not just a personality trait. It's a biological system. For years, your brain may have been rewarded for productivity, service, and self-sacrifice. Being needed created purpose. Responsibility created momentum. So when life becomes quieter, the brain doesn't automatically interpret that as relief. It can interpret it as nothing is coming. And that can feel unsettling. Restless. Flat. Emotionally hollow. Not because your life has no meaning, but because the source of meaning needs to change. Here's the part no one tells you. Many women don't lose motivation after 60. They lose the old reason for motivation. And without a new one, the system stalls. Now let me pause and ask you directly. Have you ever thought, I don't recognize myself anymore, even though nothing dramatic actually happened? If so, you're not broken. You're between identities. That space, uncomfortable as it may feel, is often where real change begins. But many women never reach that change. Not because they're incapable, but because they're carrying a belief that quietly reshapes their expectations. A belief that teaches them to accept less, and mistake that acceptance for maturity. There is one belief that quietly sabotages many women after 60. It sounds reasonable. It sounds mature. It even sounds wise. And it goes like this. At this stage of life, I should just be grateful. Grateful for attention. Grateful for inclusion. Grateful for whatever affection, respect, or consideration is offered. Let me ask you something gently. Have you ever accepted less than you wanted? Because you told yourself you shouldn't expect more anymore? That belief doesn't come from wisdom. It comes from conditioning. When gratitude turns into self-minimization, it stops being healthy. It becomes a way of shrinking yourself to avoid discomfort. And here's what happens psychologically. When you repeatedly tell yourself that your needs are too much, your brain learns to suppress them. When you lower expectations to avoid disappointment, your nervous system adapts to scarcity. And over time, that adaptation starts to feel like personality. But it isn't. It's a learned emotional pattern. And patterns shape behavior. If you expect little, you ask for little. If you ask for little, people offer little. If people offer little, you begin to believe that little is all you deserve. That cycle doesn't start after 60. But after 60, it often becomes invisible because it's mistaken for acceptance. But before we talk about how this becomes physical, we need to recognize the signals you've been ignoring for months, maybe years. Signals you've been calling normal tiredness, just a bad day, being too sensitive. Let me ask you something. Have you ever caught yourself avoiding certain topics because you knew no one would really listen? Have you ever canceled something you wanted to do because it seemed too selfish? Have you ever felt relief when someone canceled on you because you finally didn't have to be available? These are not signs of weakness. They're warnings that your system is overloaded. And when these warnings are ignored repeatedly, the body stops whispering. It starts screaming. You might wake up at 3 a.m. with your mind racing. You might feel irritated by things that never bothered you before. You might notice your jaw is clenched, and you don't remember when it started. Your body has been trying to tell you something. And the message is simple. This is not sustainable. Not your schedule. Not your relationships. Not the way you've been holding space for everyone except yourself. The fatigue you feel isn't just physical. It's emotional exhaustion disguised as aging. And once you see that clearly, something shifts. Because what finally has a name stops feeling like failure. What most women don't expect is how quickly these experiences move beyond thoughts and feelings. They begin to show up in the body, in energy levels, in sleep, in tension. And once that connection becomes clear, something important happens. The shame starts to loosen its grip. Now, let me be clear about something. Acceptance is not the same as self-erasure. Maturity is not the same as silence. And dignity is not something you age out of. Here's another question worth sitting with. Have you ever noticed that the more accommodating you become, the more people assume you will continue to accommodate? That's not because people are cruel. It's because humans adapt quickly to what's available. And when you make yourself endlessly available, flexible, and undemanding, you unintentionally teach others how to treat you. Not with words, but with patterns. This is where many women feel an internal conflict. On one hand, you don't want to be difficult. You don't want to seem bitter. You don't want to make a fuss. On the other hand, something inside you feels quietly resentful, tired, or unseen. That tension is not a flaw. It's a signal. It's your internal system telling you that something is out of alignment. And the longer you ignore that signal, the louder it becomes. It can show up as irritability, as emotional withdrawal, as sadness you can't quite explain, as a vague sense that life has become smaller. But here's the truth that often brings relief. You are not asking for too much. You may simply be asking the wrong people, or asking from a place where you've already minimized yourself. Have you ever noticed how a single comment can suddenly affect your entire body? A casual joke about your age, a dismissive tone, someone saying, "You wouldn't understand." And even if you stay calm on the outside, something inside you tightens. Your chest feels heavy, your breathing becomes shallow, your sleep that night is restless. And then comes the confusion. Why did that hit me so hard? I shouldn't care anymore. I'm too old to be this sensitive. But here's what's actually happening. Your emotional brain does not measure time the way logic does. It measures belonging, safety, and threat. When you sense dismissal or exclusion, the limbic system reacts before you can rationalize it away. It sends a message to the body. Something here is unsafe. Stress hormones are released. Muscles tense. Attention narrows. This is not weakness. This is survival biology. For decades, your sense of worth may have been reinforced by being needed, relied upon, and emotionally central. So when that role begins to fade, even subtly, your body doesn't interpret it as freedom. It interprets it as loss. And loss, even symbolic loss, activates the same stress responses as physical danger. This is why many women after 60 feel anxious without knowing why. Why they feel emotionally raw. Why they feel tired even when they're resting. Your system is recalibrating. Now let's talk about motivation. Motivation is often misunderstood as willpower, but it's actually driven by chemistry. For many women, purpose used to come from responsibility, deadlines, people depending on you, problems that needed solving. Those experiences created a sense of momentum. When that momentum slows down, the brain doesn't automatically replace it with peace. It can replace it with restlessness, not because your life has no meaning, but because the source of meaning has changed. This is why advice like just relax or enjoy the quiet often feels hollow. Your nervous system doesn't need silence. It needs direction. And here's a question worth asking yourself. If no one needed anything from you tomorrow, what would still make you feel alive? If that question feels hard to answer, it doesn't mean you're empty. It means you're ready to build something new from a place of choice, not obligation. But before we talk about rebuilding, there's one more pattern we need to expose. Because many women unknowingly carry it for decades. And after 60, it quietly becomes a trap. That's where the shift begins. Many women were praised for being easy to talk to, easy to rely on, easy to accommodate. From a very young age, being good often meant being agreeable, being helpful, being emotionally available, being quiet about your own needs. And for a long time that worked. It brought approval. It brought belonging. It brought a sense of purpose. But after 60, that same pattern can quietly turn against you. Because you keep giving, and the appreciation gets smaller. You keep showing up, and the respect doesn't grow. You keep being flexible, and people begin to assume you'll always bend. Let me ask you something honestly. Have you ever noticed that the more you tolerate, the more people expect you to tolerate? That's not kindness being rewarded. That's a pattern being reinforced. Here's something no one told you when you were young. Being the good woman has a price. And that price isn't charged all at once. It's charged in small installments over decades. One installment every time you smiled when you wanted to cry. Every time you said, "I'm fine," when you weren't. Every time you prioritized someone else's peace over your own. And at 60, you look back and realize you became an expert at not being inconvenient. But no one became an expert at taking care of you. Not because people are cruel, but because you taught the lesson so well that you're okay, that they finally believed it. And here's what happens over time. You stop mentioning what hurts. You stop asking for what you need. You stop expecting people to notice. Not because you're strong, but because you're tired of the disappointment. Let me ask you directly. How many times have you stayed silent about something that bothered you? Because speaking up felt like making a big deal? How many times have you swallowed your frustration? Because you didn't want to seem difficult? That silence isn't peace. It's accumulated resentment with nowhere to go. And after years of that pattern, your nervous system doesn't know how to ask anymore. It only knows how to endure. Until one day, enduring stops working. And that's when the body enters the conversation. Here's the uncomfortable truth. When you spend years being valued for what you provide, people unconsciously learn to relate to you through usefulness, not presence. You become reliable, dependable, supportive, but not always seen. And over time, something inside you starts to harden. You feel tired in a way rest doesn't fix. You feel irritated by small requests. You feel guilt when you say no, and resentment when you say yes. That internal conflict is not immaturity. It's a signal. It's your system telling you that the old way of belonging no longer fits. But here's the part many women struggle with. The moment you stop overgiving, you may feel selfish, cold, unkind. That discomfort doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It means you're breaking a long-standing pattern. And whenever a pattern breaks, the nervous system reacts before it adapts. Here's a sentence that can feel unsettling the first time you say it, even silently. I'm not available for a life where I'm only included when I'm useful. Notice what happens in your body when you hear that. You may feel relief, or fear, or resistance. All three are normal, because that sentence challenges a deeply rooted survival strategy. For many women, usefulness became safety. So when you question usefulness, your system panics, not because you're wrong, but because you're changing the rules. Now here's the important part. That sentence doesn't work as a declaration unless it's followed by a shift in identity. And that shift doesn't happen through force. It happens through small, repeated actions that teach your body a new truth. And there is a way forward, one that doesn't ask you to become someone else, but helps you reconnect with who you already are, with more energy, self-respect, and emotional clarity. Rebuilding yourself after 60 does not mean reinventing your personality. It means returning to parts of yourself that were slowly set aside. This stage of life is not about becoming louder. It's about becoming clearer. And clarity begins with one essential shift, moving from being needed to being self-directed. Let me explain why this matters. For years, your brain was rewarded for urgency, for solving problems, for responding quickly, for holding everything together. Those patterns trained your sense of worth. So when life becomes quieter, your system doesn't automatically relax. It searches for direction. Without direction, energy drops, motivation fades, and self-doubt grows. This is not a failure of character. It's a gap in structure. So let's fill that gap, gently, realistically, and in a way your body can integrate. First, you need to name the pattern you've been living in. Not to criticize yourself, but to bring awareness. For many women, the pattern looks like this. You sense distance or dismissal. You try harder. You give more. You feel drained. You pull back. You feel guilty. And then you start giving again. Let me ask you something. Have you ever recognized yourself in a cycle like that? Simply naming the pattern creates space. And space is where choice begins. Second, You need one boundary that your nervous system can tolerate. Not 10. Not a complete personality shift. Just one. Something small but consistent. It might sound like, I need to think about that. That doesn't work for me today. I'm not available right now. Short sentences are important. They reduce emotional overload. They signal calm authority. And they teach your body that saying no does not equal danger. Each time you hold that boundary, your system learns something new. I can protect myself and still belong. Third, you need a new source of motivation that isn't built on obligation. Ask yourself this, slowly. If no one needed anything from me, what would I still want to move toward? This doesn't have to be dramatic. It can be learning something new, creating something small, joining something where you're not the caretaker, contributing in a way that feels chosen, not expected. Progress restores energy. Choice restores dignity. And finally, you need to redefine connection. Not everyone deserves the same access to you. You need at least one relationship where you are not performing, where you are not fixing, where you are not managing emotions. Just being. That kind of connection restores a sense of safety that no amount of productivity ever could. And yes, this can be built after 60. The brain remains adaptable throughout life. Change happens through repetition, consistency, and emotional safety. You don't need to rush this. You just need to begin. And maybe, as you're hearing this, a part of you is feeling something strange. It's not quite hope. It's not complete relief. It's something smaller, more fragile. It's the feeling that maybe, just maybe, you don't have to keep carrying everything alone. That maybe you don't have to prove yourself anymore. That feeling. It's the beginning. It's the first crack in a wall you've been maintaining for decades. And I want you to know something important. That crack is not weakness. It's the place where light gets in. Two fears tend to surface right here. They're quiet, but powerful. And when they're finally named and understood, moving forward no longer feels so uncertain. There are two fears that quietly hold many women back at this stage of life. They're rarely spoken out loud, but they shape decisions every day. The first is the fear of being alone. Not physically alone, but emotionally disconnected. And that fear makes sense. Belonging has always been central to your sense of safety. So the idea of stepping back, setting boundaries, or changing how you relate to others can feel risky. But here's the truth that often brings relief. If people only stay close when you overextend yourself, you're already alone, just exhausted. Let me ask you something honestly. Would you rather feel lonely while constantly giving, or temporarily uncomfortable while reclaiming your sense of self? The second fear is quieter, but just as powerful. It's too late. Too late to change. Too late to start over. Too late to expect more. That belief feels convincing. Not because it's true, but because unfamiliar territory often feels unsafe to the nervous system. But starting over after 60 is not about becoming someone new. It's about returning to the version of you that existed before you learned to shrink. The part of you that had preferences, opinions, boundaries, desires. That part didn't disappear. It adapted. And now it's asking to be integrated again. Here's something most women are never told. Confidence doesn't come from feeling powerful. It comes from deciding what you're no longer available for. Who gets access to your time? What drains your energy? What you stop explaining? What you stop negotiating? What you stop earning? Because after 60, something important becomes clear. If you don't define your value, the world will assign one for you. And you already know how that feels. So today, you get to choose differently. If you want to go deeper into your emotional development, I created a practical guide to emotional self-mastery to support you. It was designed to help you regulate your emotions and build inner stability step by step at your own pace. You'll find the guide in the first pinned comment below. If this message resonated with you, subscribe to this channel. Not as a gesture of support, but as a commitment to yourself. And if you know another woman who feels like she's quietly disappearing inside her own life, share this with her. Before you go, sit with one final question. What would your life look like if you stopped proving you deserve to exist? You don't need to answer it today. Just let it open something. Because after 60, you're not done. You're finally allowed to be real.